Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the Song of Songs as an allegory in our continuing study of the Poetic books. The Song of Songs, think about this, it begins with, as we're first introduced to the Shulamite, to the woman, it begins with her harsh treatment in the midst of bondage. We read in verse 6, "My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me caretaker of the vineyards, but I've not taken care of my own vineyard." And we're reminded of the bondage of the Israelites when they, of course it wasn't just vineyards there, but how they were put into bondage, and they couldn't take care of themselves, but they had to take care of the needs of the Egyptians. We move from there to, once the Exodus has taken place, God sustained his bride in the wilderness with food, and we read in the Song of Songs, "Sustain me with raisin cakes, refresh me with apples, because I am lovesick," chapter 2, verse 5. God is pictured in the wilderness as a column of smoke, and we read in Song of Solomon 3:6, "What is this coming up from the wilderness? Like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant." We see that God is traveling on his, quote-unquote, his traveling couch with the tribes of Israel about him, his Ark of the Covenant, and that served as the sort of the portable throne of God. In the same way, we read in Song of Solomon 3:7, "Behold, it is the traveling couch of Solomon, 60 mighty men around it, of the mighty men of Israel." We get down to verses 9 and following. "King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair from the timber of Lebanon. He made its posts of silver, its back of gold, and its seat of purple fabric, with its interior lovingly fitted out by the daughters of Jerusalem." So here he comes riding on his throne. God pictures his bride as a garden with Eden-like qualities. So that we read in chapter 4, verse 12, "A garden locked is my sister, my bride. A rock garden locked, a spring sealed up." And of course there's other imagery there too. We're going to get to this next time. Verse 13, "Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, henna and nard plants, nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon. These are all sweet-smelling, and she's sweet-smelling with all the trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, along with all the finest spices." He says in verse 15, "You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, and streams flowing from Lebanon. My bride, you are my garden." And then there's that section where the bride awakens to find that her husband is gone, and she goes out looking for him, and she's confronted by the guardsmen. They're rather gruff, and they strike her and they wound her, and it reminds us, well, I suppose two different things. First of all, the prophets could be rather gruff in their treatment of Israel when Israel had wandered and had gone out to a place where Israel shouldn't have gone. But also there's a sense in which we can see eventually the captivities, the Assyrian and later on the Babylonian captivity, as Israel's taken away and removed from her husband for a time, but then eventually, especially with the Babylonian captivity, she's brought back into the land. And so we read that, "I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and had gone, and my heart went out to him as he spoke, and I searched for him, but I did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer me. The watchmen who made the rounds in the city found me. They struck me and wounded me. The guardsmen of the walls took away my shawl from me." So they humiliated her. Now, I think there's also some New Testament allusions, and for example, Song of Solomon chapter 1, verse 12, "While the king was at his table, my perfume gave forth its fragrance." And I think that reminds us, and ought to remind us, of a story in the New Testament where Mary takes a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And notice, "And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume." And you read that line, and it echoes of a line back to the song. So that as John includes this, and notice that these are going to be in the Gospel of John, that maybe he wants us to think of the Song of Songs and the line from the song. In the Song of Songs, we read, "You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, and streams flowing from Lebanon." And again, John has Jesus quoting, he quotes Jesus in chapter 7, verse 38. "He who believes in me, as the scriptures said, from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water." These flowing waters, this fresh, flowing, living water. And again, perhaps that we're supposed to read that and be reminded of the Song of Songs. In Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 2, the bride says, "I was asleep, but my heart was awake. A voice, my beloved, was knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one." And not in the Gospel of John, but in Revelation, we read Jesus saying, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me." Could it be that John is taking us in several of these allusions, and he's showing Jesus as the perfect bridegroom and we as the bride?